Listen up, fellow babies, it's that time again. Time for another episode of Hold My Order, Terrible Dresser, the deep dive, history nerd, WKRP and Cincinnati podcast. Once again, I am Mike Grasso. With me, as always, Rob McDougall.
Hello, everybody.
Today we've got a couple of, very Andy-heavy episodes in The Consultant and Love, Exciting and New. And if you knew how difficult it was for me, Rob, not to break out in the Jack Jones rendition of the Love Boat theme just then, I'll save all of our listeners the pain of having to hear that happen. We're going to start off with The Consultant. This episode follows a fairly common plot that we've seen woven throughout WKRP's history, Rob. The success of the station, outsiders coming in to judge the station or give advice on how to run it, and sort of the outside world of radio kind of intruding on the homely WKRP.
Yes, right. It's an example of outsider comes to upset the apple cart, which is sort of, an sitcom plot line.
Yeah, yes.
But then I think they did lampshades. We use the phrase lampshade all the time, but that is the appropriate phrase. It lampshades how unrealistic radio station WKRP really is, and really is by 1981.
Andy, you got problems here. I can tell that just listening.
Really? How do you mean?
Take fever in the morning.
Yeah?
He's late night at best. And he's playing solid gold. That's crazy.
No, he plays just a little gold.
Andy, the man is stuck in 1962. What is he, Ray Charles' uncle or something?
In this episode, Andy is trying to get, and we'll see this again in the next episode, there's continuity again, Andy is trying to get Mama Carlson on board with all of the improvements that she's done to the station since Andy busted the union. And basically she's got one sort of requirement, and that is that Andy concede to having a radio consultant come in from New York City to give his opinion on the station, its format, and how it's run. Andy thinks he's struck gold because he finds out that the aforementioned consultant is actually an old coworker and friend of his from Albuquerque, a guy named Norris Breeze, which is maybe, for my money, the best guest character name that we've had so far on WKRP.
It's almost of a piece with Rex Earhart. Norris Breeze sounds like an on-air name. Actually,
it does, yes. And Norris actually even talks about that because he's familiar with Johnny's reputation, but calls him, I think, what was it, Professor Sunshine or something like that?
Yeah.
Mixing up two of his names from off of his mug. So Andy, basically accepts the fact that Norris is coming in, meets with him privately in his hotel room to kind of get a sense of what this review is going to be all about, and finds that Norris will play ball if Andy decides to subscribe to his programming service.
Your format is all over the road. I gotta be honest with you.
Thanks. See you back at the station.
Hey, whoa. Where are you going?
No, I gotta go clean off the top of the desk, clean out the trash cans, get everything in order for your inspection, Norris.
Andy, if you want a good report, I'll give you a good report. Good God, I haven't changed that much. You're a friend. I came to see you anyhow. I wanted to ask you to subscribe to my service.
There it is.
Yeah, I don't want to inspect you.
We don't use the service, Norris. You want to know the truth? The jocks program the music.
What?
Yeah. And what they don't do, I do.
Andy, nobody is programming their own music anymore.
The scene with Andy and Norris in the hotel room, it's interesting for a lot of reasons, but one of them is that from any rational point of view, everything Norris is saying is pretty much right. He's like, Johnny Fever should be on at nighttime, and your format is all over the map, and your news guy is crazy.
You only have one sales guy.
All those things are true. And Andy knows that they're all true. And yet, by this point, Andy has completely gone over to the other side, to the KRP side, that is. And It's just, there's no question that he doesn't want to subscribe to the service where the guy says, what we do is you play the same songs over and over and over again, and we tell you what songs to play.
Yeah.
You kind of got a feel for Andy in that scene. Because Norris is what Andy was. Like he's the sort of successful version of what Andy was doing when he came to WKRP and got off that train.
Yeah, it takes us back to Baby If You Ever Wondered, back in the second season, where Andy says to basically us, the audience, and sort of Venus and Johnny, that I'm the guy who comes in, tries to put everything right, and then moves on. Town to town, up and down the dial, and like. Andy has now found a home. I mean, he's never going to be on that side of things again where he's the outsider. I mean, I think even in that episode, he said something along the lines of, now I'm one of the inmates in the asylum rather than one of the guards. You know what I mean? He's fully now just a member of that family at WKRP. And yeah, I mean, I have to imagine some of the discomfort he feels with hanging out with Norris is kind of maybe seeing a path not taken. I mean, here he is, Norris coming in telling somebody from another city to send him a Telex baby and like offering Andy some cocaine. I mean, Telex isn't cocaine. I mean, how could you, two better signifiers of big city, fast paced living. You can't really, divide.
Telex isn't, and the guy, he wears a purple satin shirt and, and he drinks wine, not beer. He offers,
Why do women always leave me for total smegheads? Why do they dump me for men who wear turtleneck sweaters and smoke a pipe? I mean, natural yogurt eaters. Reliable, sensible, dependable, and lots of other words that end in ibble. But he's obsessed with house prices and spends half his life in antique fairs looking for bargains and drinking wine. It's never beer, is it? It's always wine. What do you want on your cornflakes, darling? Oh, I'll have some wine, please. Smack!
It's well done. I mean, in the midst of that scene, I wasn't really noticing how kind of hammered home a lot of those signifiers of him being from out of town were. That hotel room, by the way, I just need to make one quick mention of it. What an incredible piece of early 80s interior decor that hotel room was. All these gray cubes, and there was like I swear, I think I saw the picture that was on the wall on the cover of a Vaporwave compilation I was listening to the other night. Like, it was so early 80s, and it was just fantastic. And like, I want to live in that hotel room. It was just beautiful.
Well, again, Norris is, the 80s are knocking on the door. Once again, Norris says that Johnny's stuck in 1962, but, WKRP is what? Stuck in 1974 or something like that, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so,
and now we make the comedic turn.
And now, that's actually, it's a pretty quiet, downbeat scene right there in the middle of the episode. The scene with Andy and Norris, and you feel like the episode might be another Baby If You Ever Wondered about, how Andy feels about where his life has gone. But no, instead, the only thing that will set things right is a zany scheme.
Yes. Always got to have a great zany scheme. Also, that speaking of downbeat, that scene with Andy talking to Johnny and Venus, in the darkened bullpen after Venus is off the air. Also really, really sort of like understated and very atmospheric, and the three of them kind of speaking in this industry jargon, you know what I mean? Like,
that's right.
Immediately Johnny and Venus know what's up.
Johnny's hanging out there because Venus is going to fix his refrigerator, which broke down a couple of months ago. You can, if you're Johnny, you can live on take-up for 2 months. That's not a problem.
How you doing? There's this guy in town.
Uh-huh.
A radio doctor, a consultant. He's working for Mother Carlson.
Well, that's it for us, then.
Mr. Norris Breeze, you heard of him?
Oh, yeah.
He's in town as a consultant, but what he really wants to do is sell us his service.
Oh, no.
That's right. We buy his service, he will give us a good report.
No services, please.
I know that. I know it. But he's just going to kill us with this report, that's all.
Come on, you think Mama is going to fire her own son? What am I saying? Of course you would.
Les will be out in a second. Herb's a foregone conclusion.
Don't you think we could get everybody to shape up at least for one day? What am I saying?
But yeah, we take this complete left turn into wacky, zany scheme. Now, here's the interesting thing about this episode when it comes to childhood memories. I remembered the first half of the episode and I remembered the second half of the episode, but I did not remember that they were the same episode.
Well,
they're not the same episode.
They're not. Tonally, they're completely different.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I kind of thought the second half was fantastic. It achieved this kind of escape velocity of zaniness. Basically, the zany scheme is that Norris is going to come to the station, snoop around, and write a report for Mama. Right. So Andy gets everybody to act the opposite of what they are.
I'm Norris Breeze.
Oh, Mr. Breezy. We've been expecting you. Would you like to sit down? We have all kinds of chairs. There's one over there, and there's another one over there, and no, that's a clock.
And you know what? Again, because I didn't remember that these episodes were actually the same episode, I kept saying to myself, this is kind of like that episode where everybody has to act the opposite, because the first people you meet are Jennifer at the front desk. And Lonnie Anderson does basically a heightened, almost parodic take on the ditzy dumb blonde. I mean, to the point where her voice is pitched an octave higher, and you know, her body language is dumb bunny, and it's just like this incredible, like, it's almost a slap in the face to the people who were saying that she was another dumb blonde back in season 1. It's
I think so. I think it must have been fun for Lonnie to play that whole scene.
Yeah.
And, she's got this little girl voice, and she kind of bounces around, and she calls Norris Breeze Mr. Breezy, and and gets everything wrong. You know, she's supposed to get coffee, she forgets to get coffee. I think it must have been cathartic for her, because that's like most of the roles that she probably got before she did WKRP.
Absolutely.
Jamie Weinman said something like that on his blog. He said that he thought Lonnie actually used that voice somewhere else on the Love Boat or something. So I went looking around this afternoon, and I found Lonnie on the Love Boat, where she didn't use that voice. She had a Southern accent, but I found an old episode of Phyllis, you know, the Mary Tyler Moore spinoff, Phyllis, where Lonnie plays a model, and she absolutely has that voice and talks like that. But the joke on Phyllis was that Phyllis thinks that she must be an airhead, but it turns out she's not.
Oh, okay. So she's been doing this subversive dumb blonde thing for a long time.
And I think we had back and forth earlier about both Hugh Wilson and Lonnie Anderson sort of taking credit for making Jennifer smart in the first place, for doing that subversion. And I don't know how this new information changes that, but basically the same joke on an episode of Phyllis from, I mean, I think she's still a brunette in the clip, actually, but from the mid 70s. Anyway, Airhead Jennifer is the first of many flipped types.
Mr. Carlson, your receptionist.
In a second, please.
Arch, here's the contract on the Rayco drugstore.
Just set it on the pile, Herb.
I gotta get some sleep, just an hour's worth.
Herb, have you met Norris Breeze, the consultant?
Breeze.
Norris.
Maybe we ought to talk to him while we've got him alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm back.
Where's the coffee?
Uh-oh.
Okay, so we'll do the big guy next, because he's the next person that we meet as Mr. Breezy is brought into the big guy's office. And I mean, listen, the big guy being a hyper competent, adding machine using, green visor wearing, general manager is definitely an opposite, but he has that green visor. Like, that might even be one of his fishing visors that he just repurposed as an accountant's visor.
Yeah, well, the thing about the big guy, to a great extent, Herb and Les's transformations too, is, I was thinking about the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect is the idea that people who are incompetent don't know that they are incompetent.
Oh,
people
I
who
see.
are incompetent, you'll be shocked to learn, it's enjoyed a bit of a vogue since the election of our current president, discussion of the Dunning-Kruger effect, that people who are incompetent tend to rate their abilities much higher than they are.
Yes.
And the thing is that, like, Jennifer and Bailey, we have two competent people playing incompetent. We'll get to Bailey. But with Arthur, Herb, and Les, faking that you are more competent than you are requires a certain level of self-knowledge. Like, like if they can transform themselves like that, then why can't they always be like that?
Well, I think with the thing with the big guy is that he's actually competence and incompetence notwithstanding, he's acting busy, which of course he never does.
We don't actually know if he's competent. We don't see what calculations he's doing. All he's doing is wearing a green visor and tapping on an adding machine very quickly. But he appears competent, and then Herb comes in a sharp suit, and
wasn't that jarring? Wasn't that incredibly just like I did a double take actually. I was like, wait, what? Wait. Is this the Frank Bonner from the new WKRP wearing the 1983 suits? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, he comes in. But basically, you're right. Like here, it's all the signifiers of her being kind of shallow and kind of slick. He has to catch himself saying no problemo. He has to say no problem.
No problem.
And with Les, as you're saying, like Les had to swallow his pride probably because Andy probably gave him that script saying, you're going to have to say that everything that you say on the air about pigs and agriculture and everything else is just a big joke because you're on a rock and roll station. That must have wounded Les's pride so much.
It makes you curious about that scene. I mean,
yes!
It wasn't a scene. It makes you curious about the conversation where Andy told them all how to behave. And Les in particular, it's hard to picture Les going along with it.
Yeah.
I actually think that I can see the big guy, especially after Who's on First.
Right.
You can sort of see that the big guy actually is game for a zany scheme.
Yes, he is.
And able to play along. But to convince Les that he has to act, that he has to disavow the way that he is. Yeah.
It's difficult. With that said, how do you think the conversation with Bailey went?
And this is the bullpen, as we call it. This is Bailey Quarters here. She's in charge of traffic, continuity, promotions, and some news reporting. Hello.
Hey.
Hi.
Hi.
You enjoy your work here?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You ever do any drugs?
When?
Because Bailey's persona is, I guess the easiest way to say it is that she is completely and utterly stoned. Like she is just has no attention span. The implication is very, very high that she is high. It's great. And because what that means is that her opposite is someone who is, like you say, incompetent, but also just unattentive and not busy. Norris even says, like, you're the nerve center of the station. Everything passes through you. And she sort of just looks up with that dreamy sort of half-stoned look on her face and just sort of nods, politely to it.
You get a real strong vibe of Jan Smithers' California Girl coming through in this scene. But shine on, you crazy diamond. Oh, Stoner Bailey is one of my favorite things in the world. Just when he asks her if she does drugs, and she's like, when? And then, sit down. I want to tell you something. And then forgets it.
Stone Bailey definitely has a song that you totally have to hear right now. Like that is totally where she is in that point.
And then the thing that I think everybody remembers about Stone Bailey is she sings the old Nestle's jingle.
Yes, it does, yeah.
Really old. It's not one that I had ever heard before WKRP.
Nestles, Nestle's makes the very best job. Barful. Remember that guy? The dog.
I I had heard it, but again, this could be that thing like in the episode with Homer's mom, where she sings jingles to him to get him to go to sleep. I think this is probably one of those things where I sort of absorbed it at a very early age. But I didn't know about the mascot of Nestle's back then in the 50s and 60s.
And this is, you found the link, so you say...
Farfel the dog, yeah.
There you are, instant chocolatey quick.
Step aside that. Oh, quick. Get Nestle's quick. It makes milk taste like a million. Let me at him.
The fight's over.
Really? Who won?
No.
Nestles. Nestle's makes the very best.
Chocolate.
You never laid a glove on me, Mom.
Farfel the dog.
Yeah.
It's a ventriloquist act, right?
Yes. Very much in the same sort of vein as those early 60s Jim Henson Wilkins coffee commercials kind of thing. You know, that's the sort of the reason why those Henson commercials where the Wilkins guy blows up the other guy are so subversive is because in the 50s it was just mostly howdy doody type sort of gentle sort of puppets like selling kids chocolate and that sort of thing. So
yeah, I found some clips today, and that dog, I thought that dog was fucking creepy.
Well, they're all creepy. I mean, all those 50s TV ventriloquist puppets.
It's the uncanny valley. I mean, ventriloquist dummies are creepy. That's a given.
Sure.
But the dog in particular is creepy. You know what it looks like? It looks like do you remember Zippy the Pinhead?
Sure,
Who would talk to this giant dog?
Yes.
The newspaper Zippy the Pinhead, there was a giant dog that he would talk to sometimes.
I bet you that would, that sounds like the exact kind of thing that he would have a reference from. And again, this fits in perfectly. It's Bailey, you know, a little kid in the late 50s and early 60s. This is the exact kind of commercial that she would remember from that period. So,
and and the exact, if Bailey was a stoner, which I'm pretty sure she's not, but you know,
a man can dream.
A man can dream. Yeah, sure. No, I'm not saying that she and Johnny never burned one, but but she doesn't do it at work,
right?
But you could see her giggling and being like, you know, that would be just the right vintage to sort of come up in her memory that she would remember. Remember the Nestle's chocolate dog? Yeah.
The staff is a different matter. Bailey Quarters cannot be trusted with even the simplest of tasks for reasons I just assume not go into. And the receptionist, what's her name?
Jennifer Marlowe.
Is certainly beautiful, but has the IQ of a piece of furniture.
I see.
Total airhead. But this is minor alongside the racial unrest that exists between the disc jockeys. I think you should know that Venus Flytrap is armed. He carries a knife.
I see.
We really don't get to see the DJs other than a tiny, tiny scene where Venus is acting like, you know, basically a thug and a bully towards Johnny.
Yes. That's probably the worst one. I mean, he's not just a thug. I mean, he's got a knife. He's threatening Johnny with some sort of wickedly curved knife. And
I didn't see the racial aspect to it, but later on when Norris gives his report to Mama, you know, the thing that gets probably the biggest laugh from the audience is like, and there is incredible racial strife among the DJs.
Oh, I certainly, that was the only one that sort of made me slightly uncomfortable because like it was just such an obvious place to go.
Yeah.
But I feel like they probably feel that they earned the right to do that since everybody understands this is the opposite of Venus.
Well, yeah, and again, I think maybe my naivete was just in the sense of, I know Johnny and Venus are the best of friends, so the opposite would be them at each other's throats. But
at each other's throats. And did you catch the musical cue there?
Oh, it was James Brown, right?
Yeah, Papa's got a brand new bag. Yeah, while Venus is threatening him with a knife.
That's pretty good. I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
You are a very, very bad boy.
Well, you know, it's kind of hard to get to know people in one day. I remember the first time...
That's enough. Hirsch!
Yes, madam?
You've been eavesdropping.
Oh, no, madam. Very handy, as usual.
Would you kindly escort Mr. Travis to the door and watch him very carefully? Make sure he doesn't steal the doorbell.
Yes, madam.
Yeah, so in the end, you know, all of this has been designed by Andy to make Norris look foolish, But I think at the end of the episode, I think Mama knows that. It's sort of like, in fact, she expressly says so right near the end. She's like, well done, Travis, that kind of thing.
Yeah, so that's interesting because, of course, it seems like how he has foiled Norris Breeze is that the report, that Mama can't possibly believe the report because the report says that everyone is the opposite of what they are.
It's kind of like putting a bunch of noise amongst a signal to cloak the signal. You know what I mean?
It's counterintelligence.
It's an old crypto
thing. Yeah. But she, Mama, almost immediately says, she says something like, "You are a very bad boy," right?
Yes.
To Andy, which setting up, I think, their relationship in the next episode.
Yes.
Frankly,
yes, absolutely.
But it's more that she kind of begrudgingly gives him credit for getting the best of her this time than that she's foiled in any sort of meaningful
That's true.
way.
It's very sitcom-y, I'll get you next week, Travis.
Yeah.
What you do at Initech is you take the specifications from the customers and you bring them down to the software engineers.
Yes, that's right.
Well, then I just have to ask, why couldn't the customers just take them directly to the software people, huh?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because engineers are not good at dealing with customers.
What would you say you do here?
Well, look, I already told you. I deal with the goddamn customers so the engineers don't have to. I have people skills. I am good at dealing with people. Can't you understand that? What the hell is wrong with you people?
Yeah. And Mama says that more of her money is in the station now, so she's going to take a closer hand.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why she's around more in the next couple of episodes. And absolutely, so that's what this season is about: is WKRP, wrestling with success for its definition of success.
Yeah, and I think that again, this is part of our greater take a drink thesis about things that are going on in America at this point. But I think in the greater sort of corporate world, there's also a bigger trend in the 80s towards outside consultants coming in. I think that's kind of one thing that, it's happened all throughout sort of business history, but it's in the 80s where these kind of huge colossal firms start coming out that will come into your business, spend 6 weeks there, interrogate everybody a la the Bobs in Office Space, and find out where your redundancies are, and most of the time find a way to eliminate those redundancies, whether they're, inefficiencies or personnel or both.
Yeah, it seems like there aren't that many new products, new places where you can actually make a fortune by making something. But instead, the place where there's room is, services and kind of information management and finding ways for other businesses to make cuts to maximize their efficiency and shareholder value.
I don't think it's going to be too surprising that if I tell you sort of like the year leading up to me graduating from college, this would have been 96, 97. People were starting to think about what they're going to do when they get out of college. They're going to go to grad school. They're going to go to law school, or are they going to start looking for work? And one of the things I think that was kind of shocking to me, especially in the fact that sort of like I hung around mostly with humanities people and some social sciences people, but like a lot of those people right out of Ivy League institution went right into, at the age of 22, consulting. And it became kind of a joke, like at the end of senior year, like, oh, what's so-and-so doing? Oh, they're going into consulting. Oh, what's that? And it was like people who I didn't
like any of those, you ask any of those kids when they were 18, oh, what do you want to do when you graduate from college? None of them said, oh, I want to be a consultant.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of like, again, I think it's a sign of its times. 10 years after that, they would have been, web media interns or something like that. But like in the mid 90s, when sort of all of this tech stuff was bubbling up under the surface, what people needed were consultants to go in and tell them how to integrate all this tech stuff that's coming into their businesses. And it was kind of shocking to me because, like, you're right. I didn't go to college wanting to become a consultant when I grew up. That's not fun at all. I think that it is sort of like a first step for a lot of people. And really what it does is it sets you up for, what's the word I can use for? It kind of sets you into this mindset that you were just talking about, where everyone is expendable and sort of efficiency is the new god, and basically everything that serves that is good. And, to a certain extent, the stuff I did in HR, most recently before my museum job, that was also consulting in a way, even though I wasn't getting anybody laid off or fired or taking away, Milton's paychecks so he would just eventually, have the situation resolve itself, It was, more just sort of outside consulting on, training and that kind of thing. But it's a weird thing because you are like this guy Norris and you are like Andy. You just kind of wander in and out of these businesses with no investment in their well-being or their success.
When we were state auditors, we had an amazing system. Yeah, Chris pumped everyone up and made them feel positive and happy, and I swooped in and slashed their budgets to ribbons. Like a majestic alley-oop. You're all amazing! You're all fired. Teamwork.
But that's necessary for you to do that work, right? Like, large companies would always have people in them who are thinking about how they can do things more efficiently, but the killer app of the outside consultant is that they are not loyal to anyone there, or that they, Norris only answers to Mama,
right?
And he has no loyalty or friendship with anybody else there, and that makes it possible for him to do what Andy can't do, which is say, fire this guy, fire that guy, and that's the key to the outside consultant idea, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just how big is the TARDIS?
Well, how big's big? Relative dimensions, you see, no constant.
That's not an answer.
How big are you at the moment?
5'4", Justin, that's still not an answer.
Listen. There are no measurements in infinity. You humans have got such limited little minds. I didn't know I like you so much.
Because you have such good taste.
That's true. That's very true.
Oh, this looks good.
What?
Hey.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is good. This is the second control room. I can run the TARDIS just as easily from here as I could from the old one. Come to think of it, this was the old one.
So this isn't particular to this episode, but I think I'm right that this is the first time we get a good look at the new lobby completely redecorated.
Yes.
It was still in progress last time. Is that right?
Yes.
This is definitely one of the things that marks season 4. Back watching this in syndication, when the episodes, I don't think they even necessarily aired them in order.
Yeah.
This is the reason that season 4 episodes stick out, is that gold beige lobby. What do you think of the new lobby?
Well, I'll tell you what it makes me think of. And this is another sort of like, from my childhood, at the age I was watching WKRP, I was also watching a lot of Doctor Who. I think we've talked about this before. It was one of the shows I loved to watch with my grandmother when she would babysit me. And there was a period in the Tom Baker years of Doctor Who where they had a backup auxiliary TARDIS control room that was done kind of in a neo-Victorian kind of beige, brass, and gold kind of color scheme.
Yeah, because the regular TARDIS, forgive me if I get this wrong, but I'm picturing mostly white, lots of sort of circles, but basically white illuminated panels, and
exactly,
sort of stark and white. Yeah,
and this one had kind of like brass rails and brown walls and kind of
it was steampunk, right?
It was proto steampunk.
They didn't, we didn't have that word then.
They didn't make it actual steampunk like the last few Doctor Who series have,
right? But it had that actual Victorian vibe.
Exactly, yeah. And so this is. I think that this was a thing in the early 80s, and from what I've seen and what I've heard and kind of done some cursory research on, but there was kind of a neo-Victorian fashion kind of impulse at that period.
So in other words, this is the steampunk WKRP lobby.
It absolutely is. I mean,
when goths discover brown. Jennifer is a goth who has just discovered brown. Yeah.
When you start seeing the women's fashion start to climb up the neckline again, and the flounces start to come out, and the sort of big fluffy ties and the ruffles and that kind of thing, you're reaching 1982, 1983, and that's kind of when that whole sort of neo-Victorian thing kind of took off.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with Andy that, like, it's not very rock and roll.
It's not rock and roll at all. It feels...
there's a grandfather clock, there's like an upholstered antique chair, Jennifer has a white and gold kind of antique telephone, like the white telephone from her Daydream. Actually, it's Jennifer's taste, basically. This is. This is Jennifer's taste.
It's Jennifer's professional taste. And again, we can say whether she's like evolved from the gadget mad girl from Rockthrow who we saw in seasons 1 and 2 and her
Barbie dream house.
But even her moving out to that house in the suburbs is kind of like an indication that she's taking herself a little more seriously. The houses that she's in, as these older men that she dates, probably means that she has seen a lot of, antique styling. And I gotta be honest, it actually fits with the big guy's office a lot better than the old lobby did, because it feels more seamless. You're going from one sort of rich brown room to the other, basically.
Yeah. We talked about, I think it was the episode that Mandy was on, we talked about how dingy and dark sort of 70s sitcoms look.
Yeah.
And she was shocked by that.
Yes.
And how then in the 80s, I think that even that sitcom sets become aspirational. So that, and certainly by the 90s, everybody has these amazing, fantastic apartments, but they also have amazing, fantastic workplaces. It's always, they all work in architecture firms and fashion magazines that look like, beautiful artists' lofts, or actually more like beautiful restaurants that used to be artists' lofts or something like that,
Yeah.
And so is this like the beginning of that, this kind of, that like the series creators had this idea that, people don't want to watch a show that looks like it's, filmed in a crappy, dingy, high school locker room or something.
I think it kind of is, but like none of the rest of the station changes that much. In fact, I'd say that Andy's growing bumper sticker wall in the programming office is even more DIY and more grungy. I mean, that's practically punk in 1981-82, right? Just plastering your wall with a bunch of bumper stickers. So it never really infects the rest of the station, but I like the idea that maybe it could. What would the bullpen look like if it were fancy? Would Les finally get his walls? And if so, what would they be made out of? You know what I mean? I kind of picture now Les behind a bunch of really sleek 80s style glass walls, but he hates it because everybody can still see in and out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so that's, if they'd gone to season 5 or 6, then this, that actually could be the theme of the show, right? Is that we actually see in the set the sort of struggle that is being set up in this episode. It's not Suits versus Dungarees so much as it's, success and 80s versus what the station used to be.
It's bumper stickers versus grandfather clocks.
That's exactly what it is.
Love, exciting and come aboard. We're expecting you, and love, life's sweetest reward. Let it flow. It floats back to you. Soon we'll be making another run.
It is hard not to sing the themes. Love, exciting and new.
I mean,
come aboard.
I mean, it's great. It was a throwaway joke, and I think Airplane 2, right? He's going across the prison yard, and the spotlight comes across, and you see Jack Jones singing the Love Boat theme. It's great.
Our second episode this week is indeed Love, Exciting and New.
Takes a lot of chutzpah to steal the song of a rival show like that.
A huge rival show. Yeah. But I think Love Boat probably well known. Everyone would get the reference.
Yes, absolutely.
This episode, Love, Exciting and New. In this episode, Andy has been spending a lot of time with Mama Carlson.
Yeah.
He's again continuity. He's trying to get some more money out of her to repair the transmitter blown up by terrorists.
Yes.
And so he has dinner with her, and he goes to a party with her, and he goes to the opera with her. And it only gradually dawns on him or it only dawns on him when Les says it, that he is effectively dating her. And he's not sure how he feels about that. And the episode, that's what the episode is about. Who's using who? Is Mama Carlson sexually harassing Andy? Is she exploiting him? Is he using her? Is he exploiting her? These are questions that make Mr. Travis very uncomfortable. And
which is always a ticket to comedy gold, right?
Which is a ticket to comedy gold.
Are you insane? It was business. It was just an opportunity to talk business.
Is it business to her?
Of course it is.
Hi. What's happening? Andy's dating Mrs. Carlson.
Don't tell anybody.
Andy's not dating Mrs. Carlson. Well, which one? His wife or his mother?
His mother. What kind of guy do you think I am?
This is a good and interesting episode. I think that along with Baby It's Cold Inside, this is probably the best Mama Carlson episode, or one of the best Mama Carlson episodes.
It is. I don't think it reveals quite the same amount of sort of depths of Mama's personality, but it definitely exposes some of them. And knowing that she is, I mean, this may be spoiling the ending a little bit, but it becomes clear that Mama does like having, Andy on her arm. Like, this is, I think, a very sort of parallel situation to all of Jennifer's more sort of older paramours who maybe it is just to be seen with them, maybe to go out and have an opportunity to be social at the opera. Can you picture Andy at the opera? It's just mind-blowing to think about that. It's also mind-blowing to think about what the Cincinnati Opera is like in 1981, but I'll leave that aside.
Lillian is probably a donor or patron.
Oh, absolutely, yes. But yeah, I mean, she basically says that, this is something that gives her sort of satisfaction and pleasure. And, the idea that people at the station would take it to the conclusion where they're actually sleeping together, I think amuses her to a certain extent. And that's why she kind of concocts this sort of scheme to make Andy very uncomfortable at the end. But I'm getting ahead of myself.
Right. She ends up pushing it farther because really what she wants. Now, you can say this is a question as to whether this is legitimate or not. Yeah, she says he has nice teeth and good hair, and or good teeth and nice hair, like a horse.
Right, yeah. It's got a plush mane,
Yeah, and, she's not going to have sex with him, and she's not going to run off with him, as she jokingly says.
Run off to Los Angeles, they'll understand them there, which gets a huge laugh out of the studio audience.
The studio audience in Los Angeles laughs at that, that's right. But no, she wants company. She likes having a good-looking younger man on her arm when she goes to all of these things, all of these functions. Mm-hmm. And yeah, being Lillian might be a little bit lonely some of the time. And so...
I mean, all you've got is Hirsch.
You call those eggs soft-boiled?
Oh, did you enjoy your breakfast, madam?
The coffee was like mud. Rather cool mud.
Yes. Well, there's only so much one can do.
Would you like some cool mud, Mr. Travis?
No, thank you.
Oh, no, please, I insist. I would like a witness to the fact that this man is attempting to poison me.
Yes, please, coffee would be fine.
Coffee. Right away, Hirsch.
Oh, as fast as my little feet will carry me.
Well, there you go. And folks, if you were listening to the first half of this episode and wondering how could we talk about The Consultant and not talk about that great opening with Hirsch, well, Hirsch is back. These two episodes together give us a double dose of Lillian's fantastic butler, Hirsch, and the fantastic Lillian-Hirsch relationship, which is just mwah.
You look up repartee in the dictionary, you get a little engraving of Carol Bruce and
Ian Wolfe.
Ian Wolfe
plays Hirsch. He's so good. They're so funny together. I was thinking today about this episode. I was wondering what the shipping name for if people shipped Lillian and Andy would be, whether it would be Lil D or Andian, but then I thought, but my OTP is not Lillian and Andy. It's Lillian and Hirsch.
Oh no,
it's Killian, Lurch. I don't mean I want them to get together. I just mean that they are perfect as they are.
I mean, here's the thing: could you have a sort of older, more hokey setup for humor than Dowager and Butler. I mean, it is in the comedy, like, vaudeville Bible. It's like, goes back decades and decades, even at this point, but they keep it so snappy and fresh. Like in the first episode, I think it was, the reference Hirsch makes, how are things in rock and roll, the world of rock and roll these days? I trust the Doors are doing well. Like, that's a stupid
yes.
joke, but it made me laugh. His delivery was just
the delivery is so wonderful. Hirsch is so good, and everything about they clearly are sparring for Andy's benefit.
Yes.
About the eggs and the coffee and how how he's not hurrying and
and again, the coffee jokes are also just ancient coffee jokes.
It is all ancient jokes. Ian Wolfe is kind of ancient. He was born in 1896.
Unbelievable.
So he is like 85 years old here in these episodes,
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's
but so sharp. Unbelievably so.
Yeah, unbelievably so. He's no longer with us, which should not be shocking. But did we say this before? He was on Wizards and Warriors.
Yes, we did. We did say that in his first appearance in. All right, we did in the one where the big guy elopes with Carmen.
Okay, good.
when Hirsch takes a long time in the kitchen, it's, "Where have you been? Mardi Gras, madam." Just, again, like a non sequitur, really well delivered, and just impeccable timing. I mean, I could watch them all day. I mean, this is nothing new in the comedy world, but they deliver in a big way. And you're right, the addition of Andy in both those scenes gives us a proxy, gives them a little somebody to show off with. And then again, like in this episode, Hirsch is obviously in on the let's lock Andy in the game room and make him feel uncomfortable kind of ending scene that we were just talking about.
And I want to say that Carol Bruce is also really good in these episodes. That's key too.
Absolutely. We saw her plotting and planning in her garden back a few episodes ago for the Union. And, now she's a little bit more three-dimensional in that her concerns run towards, her money and her fiduciary responsibility to the station. But also, there's some emotional depth to what goes on in this episode.
Arthur, get a hold of yourself. Even horses don't perspire that much.
I know you make things so difficult for me.
Well, how do you think I feel?
I don't know.
I feel offended. Do I look like an idiot to you?
No.
Well, I certainly don't go chasing around after young men. All of this is in Mr. Travis's head.
All of it?
Well, maybe not.
Oh, my.
Oh, now look, Arthur. I go places, I do things, and it's nice to have a personable young man on your arm. Particularly when he has nice teeth and good hair.
And you have been using him to some extent.
Well, he's an employee of mine, and that's what you do with employees. Well, what's the point of being in charge? And he, too, has been using me. He wants something. A transmitter.
Oh.
I mean, again, in the middle of the episode, when you're not sure exactly how far she wants this all to go, you don't know how far she wants it to go because Carol Bruce is so great about it. And sort of when it gets to this point where it's all jokey, it's still interesting. She just keeps you involved as a viewer throughout the entire episode. She's the glue that holds this one together. And I got to admit, Gary Sandy also really good. You can do physical comedy about knocking stuff off of walls. And I will say that when he tries to put his pool stick back in the pool rack and all of the balls fall out to the right, I was like, yeah, this is good physical comedy work. It's up on a par. Again, not to use another Mr. Show reference, but the story of Everest sketch where Jay Johnston keeps knocking over the wall of thimbles and they keep having to put them back on the wall. Yeah, it's good stuff. It's good physical comedy.
Yeah, well, we always say flustered Andy is the funniest.
Yes.
So he's plenty flustered in this episode. And that is kind of a delight.
And one thing I did notice is that when the rumor starts to spread around the station, we've talked about how inappropriate it is for everybody to be sort of snickering and giggling at the possibility of Jennifer and Les dating or Bailey and Johnny dating. But, honestly, they're kind of justified in snickering and giggling this time around because this would not be appropriate and this would be worthy of them kind of, holding up their noses and kind of going, well, what is going on here with you and Mrs. Carlson, Andy? That happens in the middle of the episode after Les starts spreading the rumors around.
What are you doing out here?
Nothing, just hanging around.
Bothering me.
Bothering her?
Oh, well, don't bother her. That's called sexual harassment.
It is?
That's right. And we're not going to have any more of that around here. Now, go out and sell something. Jeez. Sell that coat.
It does, and I guess this brings us to the question of how funny sexual harassment is or isn't, whether this counts as sexual harassment, whether the fact that it's a wealthy older woman putting moves or seeming to put moves on a young man, how that changes it.
Sure.
There are ways in which this episode might not be very funny. Certainly you could not flip the sexes and this would not be this would not be funny. And at least, not in the last 5 decades. At one point, Andy says that's sexual harassment. He says it to Herb, actually, which is interesting.
Yes.
He said Herb isn't bothering Jennifer.
Right.
But Jennifer says that he is as cover for what Herb's actually doing, which is listening in to Lillian in the office.
Yes.
But Andy says that's sexual harassment, and it's I don't know, it's no good, it's not allowed, we won't have any more of that around here. And he says it kind of with the flourish of somebody pulling out a new term, and Herb says, it is? And Andy kind of is pulling out a new term, because shocking as it is, sexual harassment, that idea just isn't that old, and in 1981, it isn't very old at all.
No, it's it's interesting. It actually originates on the college campus at MIT. It was used, the term sexual harassment was used in a 1973 report. Obviously, colleges and universities were taking gender issues very seriously at the outset of the women's lib movement. And so the idea that power imbalances, in the academy at this point, how many women professors do you think were at MIT in 1973, Rob? That must be a microscopic number. And, again, this is also an institution probably where women are making more inroads themselves as students at this point. So the necessity for a policy and a name for that, policy is, absolutely indicated by, again, the way that the society is changing. We've talked a lot about Mad Men in this podcast and sort of what it says about an earlier generation. And one of the things I think that shocked a lot of people when they first watched that show, if they were kind of under 40 or so, is acknowledging the fact that that this kind of behavior was so endemic to the workplace before a certain point. I find it really interesting, though, that this conception and this awareness of sexual harassment started in a university. Maybe a place where having women in the sort of workplace, as it were, was kind of a canary in the coal mine for what was going to happen in the wider society later on in the 70s.
Yeah, that could be. I also think that, obviously this comes out of second wave feminism and academic feminism, and that there's an intellectual kind of language is technology. And, this is the knock against political correctness, and it's easy to make fun of it. And in fact, if you make fun of it enough, you can be elected president.
Yeah.
But the sort of creation of new words, sort of academics create new words and thus create new problems. But that's the thing, is that until you can name it, you can't get at it, some of the characters on Mad Men, a woman working in an office like this in the 60s, have this sort of constant low grade
microaggressions.
Well, again, there's another example of a term that that a lot of people don't think is a thing, but until you have that word, you have no way to talk about that thing, that all this shit is coming at me. But then, well, did you get raped? Did you get beat up?
Yeah.
Did you, no. Well, then, what happened to you? You need words. You need words to name this crime.
Yeah.
And that's what happens in the 1970s, is that people have to conceptualize. Wikipedia quotes some Cornell activists who it says, who in 1975 thought they had coined the term sexual harassment. Because I get the sense it's one of these things
it occurs in parallel, right? Yeah.
That it sort of popped up in a number of places at once. You have simultaneous development and an idea whose time had come, obviously.
Yes.
But she says, a bunch of people were sitting in an office brainstorming about, trying to, what to call this thing, sexual intimidation, sexual coercion, sexual exploitation on the job. But they wanted something that embraced like a really wide range of persistent behaviors.
Yeah.
And sexual harassment was the word that sort of captured that.
And I think it's interesting because you could pick a stronger word. Like when I heard sexual intimidation in that list just now, I'm like, wow. That to me strikes me as a stronger, more sort of, out there kind of term that would catch people's attention. But they were talking about precisely the things you were just talking about. Maybe not the, if you don't sleep with me, you're fired kind of things, but the subtle sort of, suggestive comments about appearance or, sort of like how you're looking today. Like those are all part of this spectrum. And so you're right. You need something that's going to embrace all of those behaviors, not just the ones that are, literally about, do you have this job or do you not? The sort of things that make a hostile work environment, which is another phrase I think that's also entered our,
invented phrases. And I think that a moment in which this term really kind of, became widely known across the country and around the world, is actually later than this, would be the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas hearings in the early 1990s.
During this period at the Department of Education, my working relationship with Judge Thomas was positive. I had a good deal of responsibility and independence. I thought he respected my work and that he trusted my judgment. After approximately 3 months of working there, he asked me to go out socially with him. What happened next and telling the world about it are the two most difficult experiences of my life. It is only after a great deal of agonizing consideration and great number of sleepless nights that I am able to talk of these unpleasant matters to anyone but my close friends.
Yeah, I mean, those were something to watch live on TV when you're 15 or 16 years old and really just kind of getting the awareness of what professional women have had to go through. I mean, if you are in our generation, you've grown up around professional women, you know that there are women in offices, but then on TV you see what it's like for someone to go through this on national TV in front of the Senate. Like, it raised awareness in a way that I think no amount of, cheesy training videos or even newspaper stories could have done because, again, with Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, there's obviously another overlay. There's the racial overlay. There's all kinds of other things. But her testimony was just, here was somebody who was presenting the facts as they occurred in a rational, calm manner. In the way that the sort of technocratic consensus has told us to act in cases where there are workplace disputes. But all that the naysayers could say were, well, why didn't you say something back then? Why didn't you get him fired? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Why are you coming out now? And it was the same sort of equivocation and, garbage sort of, attitudes that keep people from reporting things like.
Yeah. And so, there must have been millions and millions of people who either maybe had never even heard the term sexual harassment.
I'm sure.
Or if they had heard it in 1991, it still to them, sounded like a funny campus word, like microaggression, I'm sure sounds to a lot of people today. Lots of people who'd never heard that. But when they saw Anita Hill, saying, well, these are the remarks that he made, these are the things that he did. And then they saw, this panel of white elderly male senators, asking her, pushing back and giving her all this backlash. Yeah. I mean, people did know that shit happened all the time. And they're like, oh, that's what you call it. That's what this is a thing.
Yeah.
And there's a name for this thing. I mean, sort of like there's the serious conversation about it, and then there's a conversation about like, is that what's going on in this episode?
I mean, that is, I mean, if there's a couple of ways you can look at this, and I think that we can't ignore the gender difference and the sort of, I mean, it's tough though, because if you start saying that, you could start making all kinds of double standards. But, let's be honest here. Like, if we're talking about the sort of extreme end of sexual harassment, where we get into physical intimidation, there's no way that Mama Carlson could be physically intimidating to Andy. There's no way. But the level that
but there's a power dynamic.
There is a power dynamic.
When there's a power dynamic, and then
I mean, that's the thing, is it reaches towards this, just like those students at Cornell were saying. It's reaching toward it's less intimidation, it's more harassment. And again, Andy went along to all these dinners, and I'm going to play devil's advocate here, but
now you're saying he went along with it. Yeah, and there's a thing they do in this episode where Mama says, and to a certain extent the show endorses this idea that, well, he was using her too because there's something he wants.
Yeah.
I think that's a slippery slope.
It absolutely is. I mean, it's just another case of it's again sort of like behavior for compensation and sort of like quid pro quo kind of stuff that, again, it falls under that umbrella of sexual. It's tricky. It's real tricky. I mean, what does Andy lose by going to the opera and to dinner with Mama Carlson? That's kind of one way you could look at it and say, well, is he giving up anything? Is anything, sort of that he's agreeing to do harming him in any way? Would she withhold the new transmitter or any of the other things that she's talked about if Andy didn't do these things? And that's kind of the question you have to ask yourself. Is it a true quid pro quo situation? It may be too deep for us to go into on a silly, sort of sitcom episode from 1981-82, but like, I think that there's probably something to be sort of asked there. It's like, is this a true quid pro quo or is it not?
Do you remember the movie Disclosure?
Very vaguely, but I do remember it.
So this was an early 90s movie, a Michael Crichton novel, I think, and then Michael Douglas was the star.
Right.
Michael Douglas and Demi Moore. Oh, this movie, like it just kind of like, it did everything wrong with it. It sort of like had this searing, torn from the headlines kind of topic, like, oh, we're going to make this thriller about sexual harassment. And it just did everything wrong, because it was like, first of all, it's like, oh, everyone's talking about sexual harassment these days. So therefore, let's make a movie where it happens to a man, because that's the story that needs to be told.
Yeah.
Number one. And then let's make it really sexy. Like that's, it's a movie about how sexy sexual harassment is.
It was a Nigel Tufnell. What's wrong with being sexist?
And then when he fights her off, she accuses him of sexual harassment. So the movie is really about fake accusations of sexual harassment against men. That's the real danger.
I mean, I think that's the trap that we kind of fall into in a lot of these cases where, you start trying to play around with the sort of, with again, sort of the, I would say that surely female on male sexual harassment is not unknown, and there's been cases in the news and everything like that. But the trap that you can fall into if you start making moral equivalencies and equivocations about sort of, how these things usually work is that you get into that exact trap that you were talking about, where men go, well, it happens to men too, and it happens this way and that way, and pretty soon you're bringing in a whole bunch of issues that have nothing to do with the very real problem of sexual harassment. And I don't think this is necessarily what's happening with Andy and Mama Carlson in this episode, but I think it's interesting that they are, in 1981, they are able to mine this for laughs. It's very clear that's, even despite Andy's little sort of, we're going to be very serious for a moment here. And the fact that we're still able to kind of find some humor in it today says a lot about sort of the way we would look at this situation in real life if it were happening to a man with a woman superior.
Yeah.
Andy, we don't know what you're talking about. You'll have to be clearer.
All right. Look, say that you work for someone, and they, it's no big thing. It's very subtle. Actually, there's probably nothing to it. Absolutely nothing at all. But still, there is something there. Maybe. How do you react to something like that?
Well, I don't know about Jennifer, but I clean out my closets.
What?
We don't know what you're talking about, Andy.
I went out to dinner with you-know-who. Les didn't tell you?
Tell us what?
And we went out to dinner again. We went out to dinner a couple more times.
You and Les?
No. Me and, Carlson's mother.
Are you insane?
Apparently.
Well, what happened? I mean...
Oh, Bailey, no, nothing happened.
Oh, but you feel a sense of pressure from an employer.
Yes, and that usually happens to women. That's why I wanted to talk with you two about it.
Oh.
Why didn't you speak with me first?
Suddenly I feel so uncomfortable.
There's a scene, it's not even a full scene, it's just a moment in this episode where Andy goes to Jennifer and Bailey.
Yes.
And they're the ones that he actually goes to for help with this.
Yep.
And he says, I figured if anyone knew about unwanted sexual advances in the workplace, it would be you two.
Yeah.
Which is really cool, but then we don't get the conversation. Right? Something else happens, and it goes off to zaniness in another direction.
Yes. I found that interesting because I think I remember when we were talking about the baseball episode, I made the mention of the fact that Les also approached Bailey and Jennifer to talk about not being included and not feeling like you fit in, and they're not here to do your emotional labor for you. But at the same time, where would Andy go if he felt he was being sexually harassed on the job? As far as we know, there's no like HR person at WKRP, and his boss is.
There's only 9 people that work there.
Right, exactly, and most of them don't even have faces because you've always seen them as from the back. But like, and his boss, the person who could intervene, is the owner's son. So it's like, where do you go in that situation?
Yeah,
that's why Andy. That's why you needed a union. You should have had the union come in. They could have helped you with this.
The union could have helped you there. That's what a union is for, you union-busting pig. He does go to Mr. Carlson, or at least he doesn't want anyone to go to Mr. Carlson, but Arthur does get pulled into this.
And then they mine that for more sort of like, I could be your stepfather laughs at the end of the episode. And
Oh, damn, this is crazy. You're pulling my leg. I can tell. You're kidding. Huh? Aren't you kidding?
No, I'm not kidding at all. Don't worry about it, Mr. Carlson. It'll be nice. We can go to ball games together. And you won't even have to call me Dad.
Les? Pulling my leg. I know you are.
You know what's funny? We've been able to identify squicky humor in WKRP very easily up to this point, and this one's kind of a little trickier, isn't it? It's a little bit more difficult to kind of, where is the line that they cross? Is there a line? And if so, where does it reside, and where did we cross it? It's interesting.
Yeah. I actually think that in most cases of squickiness on WKRP, it's been more squicky to me in 2017 than it was to me watching in the 80s.
Yes.
In other words, there are things that either didn't bother me or more likely just sort of flew over my head.
Yeah.
That watching now, I'm like, really? This episode, I feel like this episode kind of squicked me out then. And today, actually, like, I don't know. I'm more okay with everything in it.
Yeah.
I'm sort of like, oh, okay. Mama Carlson is not a monster, and once she understands what's going on, she just thinks it's funny.
Right.
And she wants to yank his chain a little bit, but it all sort of evaporates. So this is one case where, there's lots of things that this episode should be a minefield, but maybe I was just in a mellow mood when I watched it. It wasn't, my skin wasn't crawling when I watched it. I was laughing.
Yeah.
Good midday, Mr. and Mrs. Cincinnati. This is Les Nessman with Showbeat. Our guest today, the actress Colleen Camp. Ms. Camp, you're here in the Queen City for the opening of the new Bogdanovich film, are you not?
Bogdanovich.
Yes, well, whatever.
They all laughed.
Excuse me?
That's the name of the picture. It opens here in Cincinnati on Friday.
And what about all the sex and violence?
Excuse me?
What's Hollywood out to prove?
This is a comedy. It's a family picture.
Well, I am one American who is sick and tired of slow-motion death.
This is PG.
So there is some cursing.
Well, not that I remember. Oh, well, maybe a little.
Maybe a little.
Well, I mean, hell.
Hell? Hell?
What I mean is that...
I think it's about time that Hollywood made films we decent Americans could watch.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more.
You remember the movie Gigi?
Well, yes.
Funny little fascinating Gigi?
Yes.
Well, they don't make films like that anymore.
I guess not.
Where's Chevalier now?
Dead, I believe.
What's really funny about the opening scene in the booth with Les interviewing this Hollywood actress who's in town to do a promotional tour is that I remember, this is another scene I remember really well from childhood, but with no idea of which episode it was attached to. Because it's really not part of the episode in any way, shape, or form.
It's a weird little addition.
Yeah.
This bit. Les is interviewing an actress, a real life actress named Colleen Camp. Interviewing her, she's promoting a real movie.
Yeah.
They All Laughed by Peter Bogdanovich.
Yeah.
Like what's the connection between WKRP and Peter Bogdanovich? It's a movie that came out the previous year.
Yeah.
Why is she on, not why is she on the radio station, but why is she on the actual real life TV show plugging a movie?
So I don't know. I mean, I took a look to see if there was any was this a production of, whoever CBS was affiliated with at that point? It's not. Could there have been a connection between Colleen Camp and one of the writers or one of the producers or something like that? That was just a personal connection. I don't know. It's a mystery. I would welcome any WKRP fan to give us a little bit of a heads up on why this happened. I don't think there's anything in the Castle book about it. It's bizarre. And what a forgettable movie too. Like, I've never heard of this movie before, and I feel like I'm pretty up on Peter Bogdanovich's, sort of oeuvre.
What I read today was that this is sort of considered the end of, or maybe the last nail in the coffin for the new Hollywood. That this is like the end of the new Hollywood sort of phase. It's a
so this is not Heaven's Gate.
Well, I think this is a much more modest kind of a thing than Heaven's Gate.
Sure.
It's sort of not a romantic comedy, but a comedy about sex and sort of maybe Woody Allen-esque or something like that. Audrey Hepburn was in it.
Yeah.
A sort of older Audrey Hepburn. But then the movie, I mean, it's also, I would say it's infamous, except that it's not famous. What's a word for infamous that means less famous?
I think you get rid of the I and you go infamous.
This movie's infamous because of the story of Dorothy Stratton. One of the other stars of the movie was a teenage Playboy playmate or former Playboy playmate named Dorothy Stratton, who started sleeping with or having a relationship, an affair with Bogdanovich while making the movie. And her abusive ex-boyfriend, her estranged husband / manager was insanely jealous, and he killed her and committed suicide. And she was like 20 years old.
Yeah.
Like, she's just a kid.
Yeah.
And all of this happened before the movie came out, which means that all of this happened before this funny little scene in WKRP.
Right.
And I think that, the movie bombed because all anybody knew about the movie was the Playmate murder.
Yeah. And then that later became the movie Star 80, which was, kind of a dramatization of what happened. It's kind of bizarre. I'm wondering if this was some kind of way that they wanted to kind of rehabilitate the movie by putting it into media. Like, the only thing I could think of when Les has this disastrous interview with Colleen Camp is this feels like the first electronic press kit, you know what I mean? Where they have those days where you do a bunch of interviews with podunk reporters from all over the country, and they go out to the Entertainment Tonight's and the E's of the world, you know what I mean?
Is
this a way for them to rehabilitate the movie They All Laughed?
Rehabilitate. Are they trying to take the curse off this terrible murder-suicide? The way to do it is to appear on WKRP in Cincinnati. And Les goes off on about the morals of Hollywood and everything.
I know.
He says, why don't they make family movies anymore? And she says, Colleen Camp says, oh, it is a family movie. It's
PG.
It's just a weird little bit.
If there was going to be any kind of sort of dark, sort of weird undercurrent, this would be the opportunity for something like this to happen. Late in the 4th season, nobody's paying attention. Some money changes hands trying to get this movie. It's bizarre. It's really strange. Like I said earlier, I would welcome anybody who has any insight into this. She was Playmate of the Year in 1980, but I do see that she got guest roles in 1979 on Buck Rogers and Fantasy Island. And I think that
Americathon too. Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Which we've talked about on the show.
Yeah.
Colleen Camp, the one who's actually in the studio, another Playboy connection. She was one of the playmates in Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, exactly.
She also was in Police Academy movies.
Not the first one though.
in 2 of the lesser known Police Academy
sequels,
movies.
Yeah.
She was Tracy Flick's mother in Election.
Oh my God, that's right.
She's been nominated twice for Worst Actress Raspberry Awards.
Oh my God, that's I just noticed she's also. I know a lot of people really like the movie Clue. I'm not a big fan, even though it has a killer cast and a lot of great people. She was the maid in Clue.
Okay.
Yeah, that I remember her from.
Everyone's remembers someone from something.
Loving you isn't the right thing to do. How can I ever change things that I feel? If I could, maybe I'd give you my world. How can I, when you won't take it from me? You can go your own way. Go your own way. You can call it another lonely day.
Not a ton of music from Mike's Music Corner in this pair of episodes, which I'm kind of sad about. We mentioned Papa's got a brand new bag, which thank you for giving me additional context on why that was a good choice. But I do want to talk about Andy kind of, again, talking to the folks in his office. And again, in Andy's office, the area behind his desk has been a constantly rotating sort of set of posters. I loved, there was a beautiful juxtaposition in this episode. And I know you must have noticed it. There were 2 posters, each for different members of Fleetwood Mac's solo projects, both from 1981. The fairly well-known Belladonna, Stevie Nicks, and the less known The Visitor, Mick Fleetwood's first solo album, which I can't say I have ever heard of or am familiar with in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I haven't heard it either. But yeah, I had actually thought when we talked about the episode Rumors, of course we mentioned the album Rumors, and that could have easily gone off into a conversation about Fleetwood Mac,
right.
And the soap opera that was Fleetwood Mac in this period. And here we have just another reminder of that with the group, breaking up and the solo posters.
I mean, Tusk had just come out in 79, 80. So, again, big bloated double album, a lot of Lindsey Buckingham wank all over that thing. But so they all broke up, they kind of went their separate ways in 81 and did these solo albums. But then they came back together for I think, underrated, Fleetwood Mac effort, Mirage, from 82. That's got Hold Me on it and Only Over You and a bunch of other really, really solid songs. And that album definitely feels like Christy McVie is kind of like taking the helm because everybody else is off either, doing their own solo things or deeply into drugs or hate each other because of what happened back in the 77 period.
They're no longer all sleeping with each other's partners, but yeah, I really need a flowchart or something to explain the soap opera, the Fleetwood Mac soap opera with me. And I admit, people complain that the band's music was overshadowed by the soap opera, and it's true. I'm like, wait, which one is sleeping with which one?
Yeah, I mean, things had calmed down by this point, and they weren't as sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of volatile as they might have been in the immediate aftermath of Rumors. But I mean, again, I think that Stevie Nicks obviously had the best and most successful solo career, and I think Christy McVie's mid '80s output is pretty well regarded, but. I mean, have you listened to a Lindsey Buckingham solo album? I mean, he's a technical genius, but he's one of these like Brian Wilson types who really is enamored of his own ideas and will let them take him wherever they take him. I kind of want, out of a strange sense of masochism, to listen to this Mick Fleetwood solo album. What in the world must that one be like? It's got a very prominent image of Africa on the cover of the album, and I think it's kind of like almost like a concept album about going and being a visitor in different places in the world, I guess.
Different places. Wikipedia tells me that it was recorded in Africa.
Oh, okay.
All songs were recorded in Ghana.
So sort of an early white dude goes to Africa to try to discover world music kind of thing.
Right. Peter Gabriel or Paul Simon kind of a safari, musical safari.
Exactly.
Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll be back soon with more WKRP riffs and memories. If you like this well enough to listen to the whole thing, tell somebody about it.
We're online at holdmyorderterribledresser.com, which, believe it or not, wasn't taken. We're also available on iTunes, and we always appreciate your iTunes subscriptions, reviews, ratings, and downloads. So get on there and give us some stars.
Good day, and may the good news be yours.
If you've ever wondered whatever became of me, I'm living on the air in Cincinnati, WKRP. I'm at WKRP in Cincinnati.